They said I was drunk, that black girls like me always fall on our own. That's the lie they used when they threw me into the sea. My voice was calm but cutting as hundreds stared at the elderly woman on the school stage. Time ripped backward nearly 50 years. I fought desperately on that rusted, foggy deck as a white bully and his racist teacher silenced me forever, beating me senseless, pushing me overboard, wiping away the evidence, and calling it a tragic accident. In the racist America of the 1970s, who would dare stand up for a black girl left for dead? But I didn't die. 50 years later, I stood on that very stage, watching their secrets rot and their world finally crumble as the truth broke free. If you crave stories where justice strikes back hard, stay till the end and subscribe for more reckonings that can't stay buried forever.
In the 1970s, Coastal Bay High in Florida carried a tension that no morning bell could ever fully silence. Officially, the district celebrated progress. Black students could now sit in the same classrooms, eat at the same lunch tables, and use the same lockers as their white classmates. To the school board, segregation was over. Yet in the hallways, on the weathered benches, and in the quiet moments before first period, an unspoken war continued to simmer. Aaliyah Brooks, 17 years old, carried that war in every careful step she took. She was the kind of student teachers loved to highlight at board meetings: top of her class, flawless attendance, never a word out of turn. But to most at Coastal Bay, Aaliyah remained little more than a shadow in the edges of group photographs. One of only 5 black students in a school of nearly 900, she was a desegregation number first and a person second. Every morning, Aaliyah walked the full length of the main hallway with her head held high and her gaze steady. Some teachers offered brittle, forced smiles as she passed. Others looked straight through her. White students in crisp polos and Letterman jackets would step aside only at the last possible second, forcing her to move first. On certain days, whispers followed her like a lingering shadow. "That's the one. Her daddy cleans boats down at the marina. Look at her, thinks she's better than us." Aaliyah never answered, not once. One Friday afternoon, just after the final bell, the campus shimmered under the thick heat, the air heavy with the scent of fresh-cut grass and cigarette smoke. Aaliyah was heading toward the science lab when a sudden burst of frantic noise sliced through the corridor, the kind that knots your stomach in an instant. Shouts, the dull thud of fists, laughter that sounded anything but human. She pressed herself against the brick wall and peered cautiously around the corner of the old gym. Behind the bleachers, in the swirling dust, Ryan Caldwell, 18, captain of the swim team, son of the wealthiest man in town, had a smaller black boy pinned to the ground. Ryan's friends formed a loose circle around them, some cheering openly, others watching as if it were just another end-of-week ritual. The boy, perhaps 15 and painfully thin, his shirt already ripped, tried to curl into a ball as Ryan's boot landed hard against his ribs. "Didn't I tell you to keep your mouth shut?" Ryan sneered, his blonde hair catching the sunlight. One of the others spat on the boy's back, while another jeered, "Go back where you came from, monkey." The laughter turned uglier by the second. The teacher's parking lot was empty. No one else was coming. Aaliyah's fists clenched tight. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind. "Don't get involved, Lai. You know what they do to troublemakers like us." But her father's gruffer, sharper voice cut through. "You see wrong, you stand up, even if you're standing alone." She could have charged straight at them, part of her desperately wanted to, yet 3 against 1 was suicide, and Ryan wasn't just any boy. His father's donations had paid for the new science wing. The principal would blame the victim long before confronting a Caldwell. In a split-second decision, Aaliyah spun and sprinted up the ramp toward the teacher's lounge. Mrs. Langford was there, lounging by the window, her silk scarf glinting in the sunlight. Aaliyah barely caught her breath before the words tumbled out. "Mrs. Langford, they're hurting Devon behind the gym. He needs help." Langford didn't even turn. She lowered her sunglasses just enough to study Aaliyah, her lips curving into a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Aaliyah, let the boys play. You people get worked up over every little thing." She flicked her hand dismissively, diamond ring flashing. "Focus on your studies. You want to keep that GPA perfect, don't you?" The words struck like a slap. By the time Aaliyah's heart stopped pounding, Langford had already turned away, adjusting her scarf without a glance outside. Aaliyah raced back to the scene, but it was too late. The assailants had scattered. Devon lay crumpled in the dirt. Their eyes met for a brief haunted moment, both understanding the same bitter truth. Here, no one would stand up for them. Aaliyah gently helped him to his feet. He flinched as she wiped dirt from his cheek, shame and fury warring in his expression. "Don't say anything," he whispered. "It'll make it worse." Aaliyah's voice was tight but resolute. "If we stay quiet, it never ends." Later, in the fading light, Aaliyah stood at the window of an empty classroom, watching the last students drift away. Through the glass, she saw Mrs. Langford strolling across the quad, laughing lightly with another teacher, completely unbothered, untouched. Aaliyah's fists whitened at her sides. For a long moment, she watched Devon limp off, backpack sagging from one shoulder, while the outside world carried on with its hollow Friday normalcy. Inside her, a storm was building. That evening, long after the school had fallen silent, Aaliyah lingered in the shadowed hallways, determination settling hard in her chest. She began searching for any evidence that might force the administration to face what hid behind their polished walls. She didn't yet realize it, but with every quiet step, she was crossing an invisible line, straight into the lion's den. The after-hours corridors of Coastal Bay High felt like another world entirely, stripped of voices, laughter, and even the faint hope that sometimes arrived with the morning tide.
Aaliyah paused at the intersection near the faculty lounge, pressing her back against the cool wall while straining to hear any movement. A sharp giggle suddenly sliced through the silence, making her freeze. The sound drifted from the narrow corridor by the supply room, a forbidden area for students, especially one like her. Heart pounding, she hesitated before creeping closer. The old door stood slightly ajar, a thin beam of golden light spilling across the tiles. Inside, two shadows shifted. Aaliyah held her breath. It was Ryan Caldwell, his familiar swagger unmistakable in every posture, and perched intimately on his lap was Mrs. Langford. The polished facade she wore in class had vanished. Her laughter now sounded forced and overly familiar, silk scarf loosely hanging from one shoulder as her manicured fingers drew lazy circles on his chest. Langford's voice dropped to a low, dangerous murmur. "You should have seen her face today, Ryan. That little colored girl, Aaliyah, came running to me with those wide eyes, thinking I'd help her friend. I sent her straight back where she belonged." Ryan's lips twisted into a cold, pleased smirk. "She never learns, does she? Someone needs to teach that pest a lesson she'll never forget." Aaliyah's stomach churned, the world spinning not only from the revulsion of what she was seeing, her teacher, the person meant to protect her, wrapped around the boy who tormented kids like Devon, but from the chilling realization that these two held far more power than she had ever suspected. Langford nuzzled Ryan's ear, her tone shifting to something cloyingly sweet. "You are my star pupil, darling. Don't let that girl ruin your future. You know what's at stake." Ryan scoffed, his hand sliding higher up her thigh. "She's nothing. Let me handle her."
Cold sweat beaded on Aaliyah's forehead as she flattened herself against the wall, praying the shadows would hide her. For a moment she considered fleeing, pretending she had seen nothing, but then Langford's voice turned ice cold and cut through her indecision. "If she opens her mouth about us, it'll be her word against yours, and we both know whose story they'll believe here." The words hit Aaliyah harder than any blow. Langford wasn't just shielding Ryan, she was the core of the corruption at Coastal Bay. The system hadn't failed by chance. It was built to keep girls like Aaliyah powerless. A sudden sharp knock echoed down the hall, snapping her from her daze. Heavy, deliberate footsteps approached, the kind that carried authority in this school. Mr. Whitaker rounded the corner, perpetual scowl etched deep on his face. He paused, glancing at the half-open door and the pair inside, before his eyes caught Aaliyah's faint shadow just beyond the frame. "Who's out there?" he barked, shattering the quiet. Langford and Ryan sprang apart, hastily straightening clothes and composure. Langford's cheeks flushed with annoyance rather than shame, while Ryan wiped lipstick from his collar. Aaliyah stumbled backward, pulse racing, nearly dropping her notepad in panic as the door swung wide. Langford stepped out first, every trace of intimacy replaced by iron authority. Her gaze locked on Aaliyah for a split second, a flash of alarm, quickly masked by pure malice. Whitaker loomed behind her, brows furrowed, suspicion already brewing as he fixed on Aaliyah. "Well, what are you doing back here?" Aaliyah stammered. I was looking for my algebra notebook. I must have left it after study hall." Ryan emerged with a slow, mocking grin. "Maybe she's hunting for test answers. That's how she gets those grades, right?" Langford seized the moment without hesitation. "I caught Aaliyah snooping earlier today, Mr. Whitaker. I'd recommend keeping a closer eye on school property. We wouldn't want any wild accusations." Whitaker's expression hardened, mouth tightening, as he turned to Aaliyah, voice sharp and frigid. "You students all think the rules don't apply, especially you, always turning up where you shouldn't be. Maybe you'd do better minding your own business for once." The words struck like heavy stones. Aaliyah dropped her eyes, swallowing the bitter sting she knew too well. For an instant, the narrow, windowless corridor felt like a suffocating trap with no escape. Whitaker had already judged her guilty. "Get home now and don't let me catch you here again. Next time I won't be so lenient." Aaliyah left, feeling their stares burning into her back as the danger tightened around her like closing walls. Risking one last glance over her shoulder as she turned the corner, she saw Langford watching, lips curving into a slow, predatory smile, a wordless promise. "I own this place, and now I own you." For the first time, Aaliyah truly grasped how high the stakes were. She was no longer merely an outsider. She had become a threat, something to be eliminated, and the game, she realized, had only just begun. From the outside, Coastal Bay appeared pristine. White picket fences, gleaming cars, expansive driveways, ocean breeze drifting in from the Gulf. But behind the high gates of the Caldwell seaside mansion, decay festered beneath the polished marble.
Ryan's home stood as a grand testament to both power and decline. On the dimly lit second floor, where sunlight seldom penetrated, Victor Caldwell, once a titan in the shipping industry, lay propped in a massive bed amid the steady beep of machines and the quiet presence of nurses. The faint scent of ocean brine could not overpower the heavy air of old wealth, illness, and buried regrets. Ryan lingered at the foot of the room, arms folded tightly, jaw clenched as his father's frail voice still sliced through the silence like a knife. "I got another call from Principal Ellison," Victor rasped, gazing out at the churning sea. "They say you've been stirring up trouble again. You know what that means for the will, don't you, boy?" Ryan swallowed hard, hands balling into fists. "It's nothing, just rumors." Victor gave a weak snort.
You want to inherit this house and everything in it? Then start acting like a Caldwell. One more mark against my name and you'll lose it all. I'd sooner leave my fortune to the Navy than watch you squander it on drink and foolishness." As the sun sank lower, painting the horizon blood red, Ryan stormed out of the room, a tempest raging inside him, his pride bruised and raw. He found Mrs. Langford waiting in the empty classroom she commanded like her own private domain. The door clicked shut, her heavy perfume filling the space as her heels marked a deliberate rhythm. Ryan slumped into a chair, all his usual confidence drained away. "He's threatening to cut me off again." Langford, perched elegantly on the desk in a silk blouse worth more than most people's monthly wages, let out a rehearsed sigh. "He's dying, Ryan. He only wants to feel in control. But now you have me. Do exactly as I say, and all of this," she gestured sweepingly with a perfectly manicured hand, "will be yours." Ryan's resentment darkened further. "Unless your little obsession ruins it all." Langford's smile turned venomous. "Aaliyah Brooks is nothing, a mere insect beneath my heel. All we need is one small accident. No one will care. Not about her, not in this town." Ryan hesitated, voice dropping low. What if she talks? What if someone believes her? Langford slid off the desk and circled behind him, her fingers lightly trailing across his shoulders. "They won't. You're a Caldwell. You captain the swim team. Your father funds half this town. She's just a scholarship case, a quota filler, and if anyone questions it, we'll paint her as a bitter liar with an axe to grind." Her grip tightened sharply on his arm. "Do you understand what's at stake?" Ryan stared at the floor. "My entire inheritance." Langford's eyes narrowed with cold hunger. "And my future as well. Listen carefully. When you turn 18 and he's gone, we'll marry, just as we planned. That's how we both win. But if that girl exposes us, if she destroys this for me, I lose everything, and so do you." She leaned in close, her grin sharp as a blade. "You'd go to jail, and you'd lose it all anyway." "So we're partners, aren't we?" The heavy silence stretched between them, broken only by the relentless tick of the classroom clock. For a moment, Ryan resembled a cornered animal, lost, desperate, trapped by his own errors and her ruthless ambition. Langford reached into her drawer and withdrew a field trip permission slip, tapping the date with a blood-red nail. "The Marine Corps Museum trip. We're taking the ferry next week." Her laughter carried a mocking edge. Ryan's jaw tightened. "You want me to—" Langford's stare hardened like stone. "Shh." She leaned closer, breath warm at his ear. "The ocean is endless, Ryan. Accidents happen constantly, especially to those who never learned to swim." Ryan flinched, then gave a reluctant nod, fear glinting in his eyes. Langford straightened, smoothing her skirt and slipping seamlessly back into her mask of flawless poise. Ryan watched her, a growing emptiness gnawing at whatever remained of his conscience. Yet greed, theirs combined, proved far stronger than any guilt. Outside, waves pounded mercilessly against the seawall. In that mansion and in the school beyond, old money and hidden violence wove their conspiracy, erasing the final boundary between teacher and student, predator and prey. And in the gathering darkness, the perfect crime took form, hidden beneath the innocent cover of a school field trip, as quiet and treacherous as the shifting tides. Thick, chilling fog blanketed the bay that morning, muffling the cries of gulls and the carefree laughter of the privileged students as they boarded the weathered old warship.
The air carried the bite of rust and salt. At the foot of the ramp, Aaliyah Brooks paused, fingers tightening around her bag more than she meant to. She had always stood out, but today the attention felt sharper, like a light trained on her alone, exposing a truth everyone seemed to sense, that she didn't belong. Near the entrance, a knot of white students waited in pressed khakis and glossy shoes, their looks sliding toward her with thinly veiled contempt. A couple of them laughed under their breath as she passed. One girl murmured to her friend that she hadn't known they allowed the help on these trips. The reply came as a stifled giggle, a hand raised as if to keep the cruelty contained. Aaliyah clenched her jaw and kept moving, steadying herself as she stepped onto the ship. The metal deck rang underfoot. Moisture hung in the air, beading on rails and softening the world into gray edges and slick surfaces. The vessel groaned against its lines, old and neglected like so much else in this town, dragged back into use for one final outing. At the far end of the deck stood Mrs. Langford, immaculate as ever, blue silk scarf neat at her throat, clipboard tucked under her arm, her smile perfectly rehearsed. "Aaliyah, you made it," she said brightly. "It's nice to finally reward excellence, isn't it?" The sweetness in her tone never reached her eyes. Aaliyah answered with a nod, acutely aware of the stares, alert to the tension vibrating through the damp air. Langford moved quickly to arrange the group, calling most of the students and the other chaperones forward. "Everyone to the bow," she chirped. "We might be lucky enough to see dolphins." The others rushed ahead, laughing and jostling for position, hungry for photos. Aaliyah hesitated and caught the faintest nod Langford sent toward Ryan Caldwell. Langford stayed back, ensuring Aaliyah fell behind, and sighed theatrically and rested a hand on her shoulder. "Would you be a dear and help Ryan bring up the extra supplies from below deck? It'll only take a minute." Ryan's mouth curved into a grin. "Come on, Aaliyah, don't keep everyone waiting." Her heart hammered as she followed him past flaking paint and rusted ladders toward the stern, away from sight, where voices dwindled into the steady churn of engines. At the deserted rear, Ryan stopped with one hand braced on the scarred rail and turned to bar her way. Below them, the water churned a dull gray, the deck hard and cold beneath their shoes. He leaned in, his smile edged with cruelty. "Funny, right?" he said. "They tell you that you earned a reward. What do you think that means?" His gaze flicked over her. "A pat on the head? A chance to breathe the same air as us?" Aaliyah held his stare, unblinking. "I'm here to learn," she said calmly. "Same as you." Ryan snorted and began to circle her, slow and deliberate. "You actually believe that if you work twice as hard and act twice as perfect, you'll be one of us?" His voice hardened. "You're a quota, a box the school needed checked. Without people like me, this place collapses. You're just proof of what this country's becoming." He stopped close, invading her space. "Filth, dressed up as gold. You don't belong here. No matter how hard you try, people like you end up cleaning floors. That's what my father says. That's what everyone knows." Aaliyah drew a measured breath as anger flared, then locked it down, hearing Marcus Brooks's voice in her head. "Never show fear, never give them satisfaction." Ryan leaned nearer, lowering his voice until it sliced against her ear. "Hear that? The water, the wind. You could scream all you want and no one would come. Not for you." His grip tightened on the rail. "What's it like knowing you could vanish and no one would care?" She answered with silence. It was her shield. She watched irritation flash across his face, saw how her refusal to break infuriated him. From the bow drifted distant laughter, the rest of the group wrapped in their own excitement, blind or choosing to be. Ryan leaned in until his breath brushed her skin. "You're going to die," he whispered. The deck suddenly felt unstable, each movement risky, every sound magnified. Aaliyah turned away, guided by instinct, by the simple need to survive. As she stepped off, dread settled deep inside her. The chase had begun, and she knew she was completely alone. Her instincts kicked in before her thoughts could catch up, feet slipping on the slick metal as she desperately tried to dart past Ryan toward the distant shadow of the stairwell. She didn't get far. Ryan's fist slammed into her stomach out of nowhere, driving the air from her lungs in a violent rush. Agony doubled her over as she staggered forward, gasping, bile burning the back of her throat. Before any scream could escape, a second brutal strike smashed across her cheekbone, exploding white fire behind her eyes.
She crashed onto the deck, palms scraping raw against corroded steel. Ryan moved swiftly now, dropping to one knee and clamping a heavy hand over her mouth, grinding her face into the freezing metal. Aaliyah thrashed beneath him, nails raking desperately at his wrist, but he was heavier, stronger, driven by something far darker than simple anger. "Shut up," he snarled close to her ear. "You don't get to make a sound." Her stifled cries vanished into the thunder of the waves. Blood filled her mouth. Measured, unhurried footsteps approached from behind. Ryan didn't even glance back. He didn't need to. Mrs. Langford appeared, heels remarkably steady on the swaying deck, coat buttoned tightly against the wind. She surveyed the scene with detached precision. Aaliyah pinned helplessly, Ryan breathing heavily, the deserted stern shrouded in thick fog. For a fleeting instant, Aaliyah dared to hope that Langford might intervene. Instead, Langford checked toward the bow, then fixed her gaze on Ryan. "Do it," she ordered flatly, "before someone comes looking." Aaliyah's eyes flew wide in horrified disbelief. Ryan faltered for a second. "She's stronger than I expected." Langford's mouth twisted in annoyance. "Then quit toying with her." She stepped nearer, all pretense stripped away, voice cutting like glass. "You wanted your inheritance. You wanted your future. This is the cost." Aaliyah shook her head frantically under Ryan's palm, tears mixing with the salt spray, not just from terror, but from the crushing truth sinking in. This had been calculated from the start, every calculated kindness, every lie. Ryan smashed her head against the deck again. Sparks burst across her vision. "People like you," he spat, "always trying to destroy what you don't deserve." Langford crouched beside them, bringing her face level with Aaliyah's. Her eyes held no doubt, only icy certainty. "You should have kept quiet," she said coolly. "Girls like you never learn when to stop reaching." She seized Aaliyah's wrist with startling strength, a grip that was exact, practiced, not frantic. Aaliyah recognized it immediately as a trained hold. Agonizing pain lanced up her arm as Langford twisted, forcing her onto her side. "See," Langford remarked calmly to Ryan, "it's simple when you know the right pressure points." Together they dragged Aaliyah upright. She kicked, twisted, fought with everything left in her, screams ripped away by the howling wind. Ryan hauled her toward the rail, boots skidding, breath ragged. "Let me go!" Aaliyah gasped, the plea shredded by the gale as Langford shoved hard from behind. "No one hears you." The railing rose before her, rusted, warped, fragile from years of neglect. Ryan hoisted her legs clear of the deck. Aaliyah flailed wildly, one hand snagging the rail, fingers locking round peeling metal. She dangled there, suspended over the void, the ocean below roiling dark and infinite. "Look at you," Ryan mocked, seizing her other arm, still clinging on. "You people never know when to let go." Aaliyah gripped tighter, fingers burning, shoulders screaming, arms shaking from exhaustion. Langford drew closer. In that heart-stopping moment, Aaliyah searched the woman's face for any trace of mercy, regret, anything human. There was nothing. Langford lifted her heel. "No!" Aaliyah whispered, the sharp stiletto crushed down on her knuckles, bone ground against steel in blinding torment. Aaliyah screamed as her hold failed finger by finger, skin tearing on rust. Langford bore down harder, face set in cold impatience rather than exertion. "Let go," she commanded. "You're only making this harder." Ryan thrust forward. Aaliyah plummeted. The world flipped. Fog, steel, sky, all vanishing in an instant. The ocean engulfed her completely. The splash was brief and sharp, swallowed instantly by the waves. For a long stretch there was nothing but the slap of water against the hull. Ryan reeled back, chest heaving, face ashen. "She's gone." Langford adjusted her coat and peered once more over the edge. "Good," she said crisply, voice shifting to brisk efficiency. "Now listen closely. You tried to save her. She slipped. Panic. Tragic accident." Ryan nodded numbly. Langford laid a controlling hand on his shoulder. "This ends here. Follow my lead exactly." She turned and strode toward the bow, already preparing her performance of shock and grief. Behind her, the sea sealed over Aaliyah Brooks. The fog rolled on undisturbed, while the predators began weaving their cover story, oblivious to one crucial detail. They had no idea whose daughter they had just attempted to erase. The icy shock of the water ripped the breath from Aaliyah's lungs. For a fleeting moment, pure terror gripped her, pulling her deeper into the black void as the world above disappeared entirely. The ship, the sky, the hatred, all gone, leaving only the deafening roar of water crushing in from every direction. Yet Aaliyah refused to panic. In that suffocating darkness, a calm, unbreakable voice rose up, as familiar as her own heartbeat, her father's voice, the Marine's voice. "Steady, Lee. Don't fight the water. Don't waste your strength. Think, survive." She forced her limbs to still, allowing the powerful surge to drag her downward while she tucked her chin and began counting slowly. 1, 2, 3, waiting for the burning in her chest to find a manageable rhythm. Memories of his relentless training on the jetties flooded back, endless sessions in cloudy salt water where he drilled the same lessons into her. Float, trust your lungs, don't thrash, save your energy for battles you can actually win. Far above, the ship's hull sliced a dark silhouette against the faint surface light. Aaliyah reoriented herself, sensing the gentle tug of diesel exhaust in the current and the distant metallic clang of harbor machinery. She broke the surface with a quiet gasp, then relaxed into a float, toes pointed up, chin high, preserving every ounce of warmth and strength. Each swell stung her shattered fingers, salt searing her split lips, while the coppery taste of blood mingled with rust on her tongue. But with every heartbeat, her mind sharpened. Where is the current carrying me? Which way is shore? Listen, Aaliyah, listen and think. Time stretched endlessly. She searched the horizon for anything familiar, jagged rocks, a narrow strip of sand, the childhood outline of distant docks. Her muscles quivered but held firm. Survival narrowed the world to its essence. Float, breathe, move, endure. Aboard the ship, the orchestrated chaos unfolded with chilling efficiency. Mrs. Langford's scream pierced the air. "Help! Someone's fallen overboard!" Her hands fluttered dramatically at her scarf, every note of horror perfectly performed. Students crowded the rail, faces drained of color, some genuinely shocked, most simply bewildered. Ryan shoved forward, feigning desperation. She slipped. I tried to catch her, but her shoes were wet. I couldn't hold on." His words spilled out in frantic innocence. Emily, ever quick on her feet, pulled a flask from her purse, splashed liquor across the deck, and pressed a monogrammed handkerchief in Langford's hand. With seamless coordination, Emily let the soaked cloth fall near the open railing and nudged Aaliyah's book bag closer to the edge. "Look, she'd been drinking," Emily said, voice quivering just enough to sound convincing. "She shouldn't even have been back here." Langford latched on to the story without missing a beat. "She must have found the flask below deck. The rules are clear. No students near the supplies. Oh, God, if only I'd checked sooner." Other teachers clustered around as the uproar grew. The captain radioed for assistance, yet no one searched earnestly. A few glanced over the side into empty gray water, while students gathered in anxious groups, already retreating into protective numbness. Amid the confusion, Langford dabbed at non-existent tears, shaking her head sorrowfully for anyone watching. "I only wanted to give her a real opportunity. Some students simply can't handle the responsibility. It's truly heartbreaking." Ryan hung back, hands trembling genuinely now as guilt battled the twisted rush of power. Emily squeezed his shoulder and whispered, "Stay with the story. No one will doubt you." A teacher herded the group away from the stern. Langford paused just long enough to wedge the handkerchief more securely beneath the rail, anchoring their fabricated evidence before rejoining the others with measured steps and an untouched conscience. Far across town, in a modest home encircled by tough seagrass, a man stood at his window. Marcus Brooks was built like a fortress, deep brown skin, hands roughened by war and honest labor, eyes forever vigilant. He polished the brass buttons of his marine dress blues, metals catching the late afternoon light. A sudden unease crawled up his spine as he checked the clock. Instincts forged on distant battlefields stirred without warning. Something was wrong. He offered a brief, silent prayer, but his expression hardened. Marines always trusted their gut. He would sense danger to his daughter long before anyone else. Under a bleak sky, Aaliyah powered through the final breakers, every muscle howling for relief. Her hands grasped slick rock, and she hauled herself onto the sharp reef, coughing up water laced with blood. Alive, battered, bruised, but undeniably alive. She rolled onto her back and stared into the unforgiving heavens. She had conquered the ocean. Yet another war awaited on land, one built on lies, cruelty, and entrenched injustice. Dawn broke, harsh and gray along the coastline.
Aaliyah stirred to the distant cry of gulls and the sharp sting of antiseptic in the air. Her skin burned from salt and exposure, knuckles swollen and raw, every small shift sending fresh waves of pain through her body. For a disoriented moment, she had no idea where she was, until the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor and the soft squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum registered hospital. The memories crashed in all at once. Ocean, jagged rocks, blinding pain, followed by strong hands reaching from a weathered rowboat, the stunned faces of two fishermen hauling a half-drowned girl from the waves. She recalled hushed voices in the emergency room, the doctor's astonished murmur that anyone could have survived such injuries, and then the one face that anchored her, Marcus Brooks filling the doorway, eyes dark and impenetrable as polished stone. He crossed the room in long strides, took her hand with surprising gentleness, and grounded her amid the storm of confusion. She opened her mouth to speak, but he silenced her with a steady look. "You're safe now," he said, voice low and immovable. "No one else knows you're alive. I told the doctor you needed complete privacy." He glanced toward the attending nurse, a trusted local black woman, one of the few in the building, who gave a quiet nod of understanding. Aaliyah grasped it immediately. They were hiding her survival for now. Only then did the dam break, silent tears spilling for the brutality, the betrayal, the freezing darkness that had nearly claimed her. When the tears snowed, Marcus leaned closer. "Tell me everything." She recounted it all, the setup, the savage beating, the shove over the rail, the suffocating cold, the fierce will that kept her fighting. He listened without interruption, jaw tightening as military discipline held his fury in check. Then she paused, a detail surfacing. "There's one thing. When Ryan struck me here," she touched her ribs gingerly, "something dropped from his pocket. A pill bottle. He scrambled for it like his life depended on it, almost let go of me to grab it." Marcus's brow creased. "Could you read it?" She nodded, straining to remember the worn label. "It wasn't street drugs. I think lithium." He looked terrified when it fell. Marcus grew very still, years of battlefield instinct alerting him to a far larger scheme. Across town, the Caldwell mansion simmered with unspoken dread. Ryan barricaded himself in his room, hands trembling as he frantically searched bags, drawers, jacket pockets, until his fingers closed around the small amber bottle. He clutched it to his chest, breathing ragged, eyes flicking toward the locked door. The torn label read lithium carbonate, prescribed. He sank onto the bed, back against the wall, knees pulled up, rocking slightly as the memory replayed. Aaliyah's grip slipping from the rail, her eyes still defiant as she vanished into the sea. Mrs. Langford's voice echoed in his mind, cold and absolute. "You did what you had to do. You're safe. No one can touch you." But the truth gnawed without mercy. Downstairs, Langford paced the study, phone gripped tightly, rehearsing the accident narrative, the shock, the perfectly timed tears. She paused often to listen at the door for signs that Ryan was cracking. She needed him controlled, silent, compliant, terrified of losing everything. For months she had carefully managed his moods, withholding doses when she wanted him pliable, releasing them when his volatility threatened to spill over. Victor, consumed by illness and legacy, had never noticed the swings: rage, despair, paranoia. Langford noticed everything. Back in the hospital, Marcus stepped into the corridor and placed a quiet call to an old friend who owed him favors from long ago. Confirmation came quickly. Lithium, a powerful mood stabilizer reserved for serious conditions. Aaliyah watched comprehension settle over her father's face. "She's not just using him," he said softly. "She's manipulating him completely, knows precisely how to keep him unstable, when to give and when to deny, and he'll do anything to stay in her favor." A chill ran through Aaliyah, not from the room's chill, but from understanding how deep that ship's violence truly ran. Marcus took her hand again, grip firm and reassuring, though his whisper carried an edge of tempered steel. "Rest now, Lee. You'd beat the ocean. I'll take it from here. My watch begins tonight." She met his eyes and saw the vow there. Not revenge, but justice, the unwavering promise of a Marine. In the flickering hallway light, Marcus began to plan.
Marcus approached the confrontation not as a heartbroken father, but as a soldier, silent, relentless, unbreakable. The police station crouched at the town's edge like a weary old beast, heavy with the stench of stale sweat and cigarette smoke, its windows clouded yellow from years of neglect. Marcus Brooks stepped through the door, boots ringing against worn linoleum as he scanned the all-too-familiar scene with narrowed eyes. The dispatcher tapped lacquered nails on her keyboard, a crooked calendar hung on the wall, and mugshots, far too many black faces, stared out from the wanted board in glaring disproportion. Behind the smeared glass of the sheriff's office, Sheriff Harlan slouched in his chair, a bloated figure crammed into a tan uniform that strained at every seam. His boots rested on the desk beside a greasy donut box and a half-empty bourbon bottle, his badge shining bright but hollow. Marcus waited patiently while Harlan finished a crude joke with his deputy, the punchline punctuated by a sidelong glance and a slow, mocking chuckle. At last, Harlan waved him in with two lazy fingers, irritation plain on his face. "So," Harlan drawled without looking up from his papers, "what brings you to my fine station today, Mr. Brooks?" Marcus inhaled slowly, voice calm and courteous. "I'm here to file a missing persons report. My daughter, Aaliyah Brooks, she didn't return from her school trip yesterday. I want an official record opened." Harlan finally lifted his gaze, small eyes glinting with amusement. "Oh, that's the fuss. Son, the school already called, got it all handled." He rummaged in a drawer and pulled out a neatly typed report, tossing it onto the desk like trash. "Your girl got herself in some trouble, that's all," he said, producing a handkerchief. "Recognize this, maybe?" He dangled the damp monogrammed cloth between his fingers. "Reeks of whiskey. Found right where she went over. Witnesses say she was drinking. Kids these days, what can they do?" Marcus ignored the cloth, studying Harlan's smug satisfaction, and practiced false sympathy. "Did anyone properly search the water?" he asked quietly. Harlan barked a laugh. "Couple boats went around, but it's a big ocean, son. Things happen." He leaned back, guts spilling over his belt. "You know how it is. Sometimes you just can't fix what you raise." The insult struck hard, but Marcus stood unmoved, spine straight as steel. "I want a real investigation," he stated evenly. Harlan's grin widened, cruel and lazy. "Easy there, boy." The word dripped ancient poison. "Don't come demanding things. You've got your story. I've got signed statements from the teacher, the captain, a dozen fine white citizens, all saying the same. Case closed. Don't embarrass yourself, or your daughter." Marcus's jaw flexed, but he held silent. In another life he might have erupted, overturned the desk, roared until the walls shook, but battlefield discipline kept him steady. Harlan sipped his bourbon, eyes locked on Marcus. "Want to be useful? Go home, pray, talk to your preacher about forgiveness." Marcus glanced at the folded report. The official lie was already written, an exemplary student erased by fabrications and a liquor-stained rag, a black father brushed aside as a nuisance. He offered no argument, no plea. Instead, he snapped his heels together and delivered a crisp Marine salute. Harlan barely acknowledged it, more amused than intimidated. Marcus turned and walked out, the door thudding shut behind him. Outside, harsh midday sun beat down through air thick with heat and diesel fumes. He paused on the steps, gazing up at the tattered American flag whipping in the breeze, red, white, and blue dulled by grime and disregard. For a long moment he watched it twist, then murmured under his breath, "I fought for that flag. Now I have to fight the men hiding behind it." The words settled as controlled fury coiled inside him. Not wild or frantic, but honed and precise. He understood clearly now that in this town the law was merely another tool for men like Harlan, purchased and wielded by families like the Caldwells. Justice was whatever narrative the powerful chose to write. Marcus strode to his weathered old Ford pickup truck, as scarred as his dignity, and sat behind the wheel for a quiet minute, eyes closed, breathing deep and deliberate. The battlefield had shifted. He wouldn't win this through courtrooms or appeals to men like Harlan. He needed a different strategy. He needed brothers in arms. Pulling out his worn address book, he dialed the first number. "Leon, it's Marcus. I need you. I need all of you." As the line connected and a familiar voice answered, the decades since Vietnam collapsed into one fierce, burning resolve. This fight was no longer about mere survival. It was about justice, pursued by whatever means remained to a man who had already lost everything once. The bar hadn't changed since 1969. Dim, scarred, a refuge for the overlooked. Cigarette haze hung beneath flickering neon, seeping into every split and crevice of the weathered wood paneling.
Marcus slipped into the bar, the door groaning shut behind him. The jukebox played a mournful country tune that no one bothered to see through to the end. At a shadowed table in the back, Leon hunched over a glass of whiskey, graying hair pulled into a short ponytail, thick glasses catching the dim light under the brim of his worn Marine Corps cap. Leon had once been the platoon's radio genius, the man who could pull clear signals from jungle static and listen in on channels no one was supposed to reach. These days he shut out the world, scribbling half-finished crosswords and cryptic diagrams on bar napkins that only he could decipher. Tyrone sat beside him, broad and barrel-chested, a jagged scar cutting through his left eyebrow, nursing a beer with the same deliberate slowness he'd shown since leaving Da Nang. His knuckles remained perpetually swollen, and he still wore that same faded army jacket, cuffs darkened with oil and old memories. Marcus took the seat across from them. For a long moment no one spoke, only the low drone of the cooler and the bartender's distant grumbling filling the air, along with the familiar ache that never quite left their joints. Leon broke the quiet first, peering over his glass at Marcus. "Heard you were hunting trouble, Brooks. Looks like trouble hunted you down instead." Marcus met both their gazes. "It came from my family." Tyrone grunted. "The girl?" Marcus nodded once. No further explanation was needed. The pain and fury hung unspoken between them. In a town like theirs, bad news spread quicker than mercy ever did. Leon tapped the table lightly. "Say it plain, no guessing." Marcus leaned forward, voice even and low. "They tried to murder Aaliyah, covered it up clean. The sheriff's bought and paid for. If we wait on the law, her truth gets buried forever." The silence that followed carried a new charge, electric and alive. Tyrone's jaw tightened. Leon set his glass down and tugged his cap lower, bracing against ghosts from long ago. "Same damn war," Tyrone muttered, "just a different field." Leon glanced around the empty bar, then fixed on Marcus. "What do you need?" Marcus didn't hesitate. Eyes, ears, muscle. "You in?" Leon flashed a crooked grin, broken teeth glinting. "Remember that radio outpost in Hue?" Marcus allowed a tight smile. "I remember, and I remember you got us all out clean." Tyrone thumped the table gently, the sound lingering. "Still got my tools and the van. She's ugly as sin, but she'll run." A weight eased from Marcus's chest.
This isn't only for Aaliyah, it's for all of us. No oaths were spoken. The bond formed in shared scars and unspoken wounds. Each man knew the price of doing nothing. Outside, the setting sun painted the parking lot in bruised gold. They piled into Tyrone's battered van, an unmarked veteran that still carried faint traces of cordite and gasoline. Inside, Leon dug through a crate of gear, binoculars, an old film camera, a reel-to-reel recorder patched together with electrical tape. "Nothing high-tech," said Leon, adjusting his glasses, "but we'll get what we need, old school, no slip-ups." Their first destination was the Caldwell Estate, a towering stronghold of stone and glass overlooking the bay. They parked deep in the shade of a pine cluster, keeping the van hidden. Through binoculars, they observed the comings and goings, cars, gardeners, the predictable rhythm of wealth. Tyrone kept watch, toothpick rolling between his teeth, boot propped on the dash. Rich folks never notice the old guys mowing their lawns, do they? Leon snapped photos at steady intervals. Nope, and they sure as hell don't look up. Marcus swept the windows methodically, anger honed to a fine edge. We need solid proof, something linking Langford and Ryan to Aaliyah's accident, patterns, faces, anything hidden. Hours dragged as shadows lengthened across manicured grass. They rotated shifts, logging every detail, departures, arrivals, lights burning late into the night. Well after dark, Langford's car pulled up the drive. Ryan stumbled out, unsteady and head down, followed closely by Langford's sharp, commanding figure. Their posture screamed tension. Arguments hissed in the shadows. Leon captured frame after frame. Freezing the instant Langford shoved Ryan against the car, her face contorted in rage. Something's breaking, the kid's unraveling. They watched Ryan disappear inside, while Langford lingered on the porch, scanning the night as though she felt unseen eyes upon her. Back in the van, Tyrone jotted notes in a tattered notebook. "She's the one pulling the strings, the boy's just a puppet." Marcus nodded, mind shifting. "We need the real weakness. Who truly holds the money, the power?" Leon trained the binoculars on a faint upstairs glow. The old man, Victor, bet he has no clue what his son's done. Langford's keeping him blind. Marcus's jaw set firm as a plan crystallized, cold and precise. And that's our opening. We get the truth straight to the one who matters. The three men, scarred, weary, yet unyielding, watched the mansion lights wink out one by one. In the cramped darkness of the van, Marcus murmured, "Target acquired." They would wage this fight with what remained: cameras, patience, unbreakable loyalty. This time they would not be erased. The Caldwell estate lay hushed in the late hours, wrapped in night, yet pulsing with buried secrets. Upstairs, machines chorused in steady rhythm, beeps, hisses, hums, marking time with a dying man's faltering heart.
Victor Caldwell, patriarch of an empire forged in salt and steel, lay propped against crisp white pillows, oxygen mask hissing softly at his lips. The window cracked open just enough to admit the briny sea air, a constant reminder of the vast domain he had built and the fragile limits now confining him. On the bedside table rested a crowded legal pad, a pen, and 2 medicine bottles, one his vital lifeline, the other something far different. Close by, Victor's attorney, Mr. Addison, gray, gaunt, and razor-sharp, sat in a tall leather chair, reading aloud from the revised will draft. Victor's voice emerged as a rough rasp, yet carried unmistakable clarity. "Skip the sentiment. Read the part about my son." Addison adjusted his spectacles and continued. "To my son, Ryan Alexander Caldwell, a restricted trust accessible only upon demonstration of character, responsible conduct, community service, completion of a degree, or meaningful contribution to the family foundation." He paused, glancing up. "Should those conditions remain unmet, the balance of the estate shall pass to the U.S. Navy Memorial Fund." Victor managed a thin, dry smile. "Ryan believes it's all owed to him. He'll learn the hard way or inherit nothing." At that moment, the door eased open with a faint creak. Mrs. Langford entered, radiating practiced concern, hair perfectly pinned, voice draped in silk. "Sorry to interrupt. Is there anything I can get you, Victor? Are you comfortable?" Her gaze, however, drifted briefly to the medicine bottles. Addison gathered his documents, composure impeccable. "We're nearly done. Victor wishes the revisions finalized tonight." Langford approached the bed and placed a cool hand on Victor's arm. "I only want what's best for you and Ryan. He's been utterly devastated by that awful accident. The poor girl, it's weighed heavily on him, yet he's shown real maturity. You'd be proud." Victor studied her, mind still keen despite the illness. "Don't patronize me, Victoria. My son needs to grow into a man, not remain a pampered project." Langford's fingers tightened slightly on his hand. "He's young, but he's good at heart. All those terrible rumors about Aaliyah being bullied, it's heartbreaking, but none of it was Ryan's fault. Everyone knows she was troubled." Outside, hidden down the hill in their weathered van, Marcus and his brothers listened intently through the microphone Leon had planted in the shrubbery hours earlier. Every word from Addison, every subtle twist from Langford filtered through faint static and wound onto reels of magnetic tape. "Listen to her," Leon muttered, fine-tuning the dials. "She's got the old man completely twisted." Marcus shook his head, eyes narrowed. "Not for much longer." Upstairs again, Addison snapped his briefcase shut. "The document is clear, sir. We'll have you sign first thing tomorrow." Victor nodded weakly, already drifting. Langford offered sweetly to escort Addison out. In the hallway, she let her facade slip for only a second. "Mr. Addison, please ensure Victor remains comfortable. No unnecessary stress. The doctors insist on complete rest. No further changes tonight." Addison gave a curt professional nod and departed. Langford returned to the bedroom like a silent shadow, gazing down on Victor, whose eyes had closed, breathing labored. Without the slightest hesitation, she lifted the heart medication and swapped it for an almost identical bottle concealed in her sleeve, nothing more than harmless saline. With smooth precision, she pocketed the genuine pills, closed her purse, and whispered, "Rest well, darling," while brushing a stray hair from her forehead. "It will all be over soon." Downstairs, Ryan stumbled through the door, eyes red and swollen. Langford seized his elbow in a vice-like grip and hissed, "Keep your mouth shut. No more mistakes. The will is being altered. If you want any part of it, you'll behave." Ryan nodded meekly, diminished and trembling as she steered him away from his father's room. Out in the van, Tyrone clutched the steering wheel until his knuckles blanched. "Did she just?" Leon rewound the tape briefly, then met Marcus's gaze. "She switched the men. She's ending him slow." Cold determination hardened over Marcus's anger. "We're running out of time. If Victor dies before signing, everything passes to Ryan, and Langford controls it all. If he lives long enough to hear the truth, we still have a shot." The three men sat in taut silence while wind moaned across the bluff. In the mansion above, Malice operated quietly, cloaked in false kindness and elegant silk. Marcus watched the light in Victor's room dim and finally extinguish. His decision crystallized. We save him, or we lose it all. The days following Victor's close call lingered over the town like a dark bruise. At Coastal Bay High, the surface appeared unchanged. Students moved between classes. Teachers whispered in the lounge. Sunlight slanted through dusty windows as though the world remained untouched.
For Ryan Caldwell, the very air felt thick with menace. It started subtly, with small, unsettling details. Monday morning, he opened his locker to find his left shoe drenched in salt water, a puddle forming on the shelf, and sand scattered like a deliberate mockery, the exact shoe style Aaliyah had worn on the field trip. He stared at it, knuckles turning white, heart pounding in his throat. Someone was toying with him, but who would have the nerve? That afternoon, a folded note slipped from his history textbook. He unfolded it with shaken fingers to reveal one shaky line. "I know you take lithium." The words seared his palm, a buried secret yanked from the depths. At first, Ryan tried to dismiss it, lashing out at his friends, accusing them of cruel ghost jokes, but the sharpness in his voice betrayed him. When he demanded answers, none could meet his eyes. Even the toughest in the group muttered, "Wasn't me, man," before drifting off. A cold distance began to widen between them. The incidents escalated. Tuesday evening, he returned home to find the word murderer etched in condensation across his car windshield. Nights brought relentless dreams of drowning water, hands slipping from rusted rails, Aaliyah's eyes staring accusingly from every shadow. Mrs. Langford noticed the change first. She cornered him outside her classroom, brittle smile in place, eyes razor sharp. "You look awful," she whispered, low enough for only him to hear. Ryan glared back. "Someone's messing with me. Lockers, notes, twisted games. You know anything about it?" Langford's mouth thinned. "No, and you'd better keep quiet. The less you say, the safer we stay. Understand?" But Ryan no longer trusted her. Paranoia took root and twisted everything. Hallways became minefields, every murmur a threat. He grew volatile in class, snapping at teachers, pacing restlessly. Fearing poison, he began skipping his lithium doses, and the fragile equilibrium Langford had so carefully controlled started to collapse, first a tremor, then a full unraveling. Marcus observed it all from afar. The pressure campaign was precise and untraceable. Leon and Tyrone ensured nothing led back to them. Borrowed janitor keys, perfectly timed notes slipped into lockers, the soaked shoe planted at the exact moment to maximize dread. Each act served as a chilling reminder the past was not dead and someone was closing in. One morning in chemistry, Ryan sat at the back, gripping his pencil until his knuckles blanched, sweat beading along his hairline as the teacher lectured on reactions and solvents while the class drowsed. Thick fog rolled in from the bay outside the window. A movement caught his eye, a figure in a dark hooded sweatshirt, standing motionless beyond the fence, face obscured in gray mist. Ryan blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, but the shape remained. It had to be Aaliyah. She was supposed to be dead, drowned, erased forever. Yet there she stood, watching like a specter. Panic surged uncontrollably. Ryan shot to his feet, chair clattering backwards. "She's here!" he yelled, wild-eyed, jabbing a finger toward the window. "She's out there! She's back!" Chaos erupted in the classroom as the teacher demanded order. Ryan lunged for the door, but the hooded figure dissolved into the fog. Langford arrived moments later, drawn by the uproar, and found Ryan slumped in the hallway, trembling violently. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed, dropping to one knee beside him. He glared up, voice cracking. "You swore she was dead. You said no one would come for us, but she's here. She's coming for me." Langford seized his face, grip bruising. "Pull yourself together. It's just your nerves. You're not thinking clearly. Get back on your medication. I'll handle everything." But for the first time, Ryan jerked away, suspicion flashing bright. "Or maybe you're behind the notes. Maybe you want me to fall apart so you can blame it all on me. Maybe you were never really on my side." Langford recoiled as though struck, their fragile partnership fracturing. She stood, voice icy. "Grow up, Ryan. You're only making this worse for us both." But Ryan was beyond listening. He lurched away, eyes darting frantically as his mind unraveled and the walls closed in. From the far edge of campus, Aaliyah watched them tear at each other, hood pulled low, face hidden in shadow. She melted back into the mist, silent, unseen, yet no longer powerless. And in those widening fissures, the long empire of silence finally began to crumble. Rain lashed the windows of Coastal Bay High as afternoon bled into evening. Corridors emptied until a distant hum of custodians and a jangle of keys remained. In her office, Mrs. Langford sat beneath the glare of a desk lamp, idly shuffling lesson plans that required no real attention.
Mrs. Langford maintained flawless posture,
lipstick pristine, yet her fingers restlessly traced patterns on the mahogany desktop. A sudden knock shattered the quiet, and the door burst open without invitation. Ryan stumbled in, eyes frantic, hair damp from the rain, face gaunt and ashen with raw panic. He looked more broken than ever, skin almost colorless, hands shaking uncontrollably. Langford's pulse quickened, not from worry, but from cold assessment. She rose swiftly, pulling the blinds closed in one fluid motion. "Ryan," she hissed, "what are you doing here? You're meant to stay invisible." He slammed the door and nearly stumbled over the rug's edge. "I can't take it anymore." His voice fractured. "Where's my medicine? You promised more. I'm falling apart." "I'm seeing things, hearing things. She's out there. Aaliyah's out there. I know it." Langford pressed a manicured finger to her lips. "Lower your voice. Do you want the entire school listening?" She crossed the room, seized his arm, and guided him firmly to the desk. "Sit. Breathe. Tell me exactly what happened." Ryan collapsed into the chair, hugging his knees and rocking slightly. "You swore if I followed your orders I'd be safe, but I'm not. The notes, the shoe, those twisted messages, I know you sent them. You're trying to drive me insane, make me the scapegoat." Langford's face hardened. "Don't be absurd. If I wanted you gone, you'd already be gone. Calm yourself." Ryan surged to his feet, eyes blazing. "No, you manipulated me. You ordered me to eliminate her, said it was the only way. You wanted my father's fortune, not me." Langford's hand flashed in a blur. The slap cracked like a whip. Ryan staggered, stunned, cheek burning. "Shut up, you fool," she snarled. "You killed her. You shoved her overboard. I covered for you. Don't you dare shift the blame. If you fall, you'll pull me down too, but I'll ensure you hit the ground first." Ryan reeled back, rubbing his jaw. For a long stretch, neither spoke while rain hammered the windows and thunder rumbled overhead. Langford's breathing grew ragged, her carefully constructed mask fracturing further than ever. He stared at her, tears welling. "You destroyed everything!" She turned away, steadying herself. "You did this, Ryan. I handed you the world and you squandered it. No more pills, no more protection. If you shatter, you're alone." His voice broke, raw with hurt and rage. "I hope you burn." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled, footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. Langford stood motionless in the sudden silence, fists clenched until her knuckles blanched. She never noticed the reel-to-reel recorder concealed beneath her desk, its faint green light pulsing as the final inches of tape spun to the end. Outside, in the weathered van, Leon rewound the recording with expert ease. Marcus and Tyrone leaned close, straining to hear the crackling voices through static. Langford's damning admissions, Ryan's desperate accusations, the brutal collapse of their partnership laid bare. The tape clicked to a stop. Leon swore softly. "Ran out. We lost the tail end." Marcus frowned, yet a spark of hope lit his eyes. "It's imperfect, but it's enough to tear them apart." Tyrone tapped the cassette case. "Will it stand up in court?" Marcus shook his head. "No judge here would touch it, but we don't need a courtroom win yet. We need cracks, doubt, whispers, enough to force Victor to question everything." He turned the tape over in his palms, watching it catch the van's weak light. "This is the spark, not the fire." Tyrone grinned fiercely. "Then let's deliver it where it'll burn brightest." The storm raged outside, but inside, another reckoning gathered force. Langford and Ryan were coming undone, their hidden influence crumbling as shadows gave way to glaring exposure. Marcus slipped the cassette into an envelope, addressing it in bold, steady script. "For Victor Caldwell, urgent." He sealed it with finality, determination solidifying. The fight for Aaliyah's justice had entered a new stage where even partial truth could no longer be silenced. The final play now rested with the fading patriarch. The storm peaked at midnight, battering the windows of the Caldwell mansion until the frames rattled in protest. Rain pounded the slate roof, lightning ripped across the sky in violent flashes, and the sprawling house seemed to cower under the onslaught of wind and buried remorse. Victor Caldwell lay in his shadowed bedroom, breath labored beneath the oxygen mask, eyelids twitching, machines beeping in erratic patterns while monitors blinked urgent red alerts. He could sense death creeping nearer with every weakened beat, yet his mind, worn but still sharp, clung to unresolved matters. In fevered half-dreams, he saw ships cutting through the channel, smelled salt and diesel, remembered a time when power felt solid in his grasp. Now that grasp was slipping, forcing him to reckon with every misjudgment. A faint noise roused him, not the nurse's measured steps, always predictable and announced, but something stealthier. A shadow shifted in the doorway, fluid as smoke. Marcus Brooks entered with the silent economy of a seasoned soldier, rainwater dripping from his jacket, face illuminated in stark stormlight and etched with unyielding purpose. He paused inside the threshold, scanned the room, then approached the bedside in swift, quiet strides. Victor's eyes snapped open, alarm flaring as he fumbled instinctively for the call button. Marcus's hand covered it firmly, yet without menace. "I'm not here to harm you," he said in a low, even tone, "but you need to hear me out. This is your last chance to set something right." Victor stared, recognition dawning. This was the man he knew vaguely from town, never this close, never with such fierce intent. "Who let you in?" "No one," Marcus answered. "You pay people to keep the world out. You never imagined someone would come for the truth." He drew a concealed vial of genuine heart medication from his pocket and held it beside the bedside bottle. "You're fading faster than you should. She's been replacing your drugs." Victor stiffened, mind racing through fog and toxin to piece it together. "Langford, she's poisoning you," Marcus stated plainly, "the same way she tried to murder my daughter." Victor struggled for words, managing only a wheezing gasp. Marcus moved quickly, drawing a proper dose from the real vial and administering it into the IV line. He watched the monitor stabilize, Victor's heartbeat settling into a stronger rhythm, chest rising with deeper breaths. Clarity returned, sharpening the pain and horror in the old man's eyes. "Why help me?" Marcus placed a rain-streaked envelope on the nightstand, boldly inscribed, "For Victor Caldwell, urgent." Then set up the reel-to-reel recorder Leon had prepared. The whir filled the room as he hit play. Static gave way to voices, Langford's cold and commanding, Ryan's fractured and pleading. The recorded confession poured into the darkness, cutting Victor to the core. "You pushed her. I cleaned up your mess. If you go down, you'll drag me with you." Victor gripped the sheet with a trembling hand as the betrayal unfolded. His son warped by greed and weakness, the woman he trusted revealed as ruthless and lethal. Each word struck like an undefendable blow. The tape ended abruptly in silence, heavier than the raging storm outside. Victor turned his face away, tears tracing down weathered cheeks, not for his own fate, but for the ruin of everything he had believed himself master of. Voice ragged with sorrow, he managed, "Why not end me after what my son did to your child?" Marcus met his gaze without flinching. "Because my daughter lives, and because I'm a soldier, not a killer. I seek justice for Aaliyah, for all of us." Victor's shoulders slumped, decades of arrogance stripped away, leaving only a shattered father desperate for some shred of redemption. His spotted hand reached out, shaking, and closed around Marcus's wrist. "Help me," he whispered. "Help me make one thing right before I go. Get me to graduation tomorrow. I need to set the house in order." Thunder boomed, underscoring the weight of the moment. Marcus nodded, the pledge between old warriors silent but absolute. Beyond the door, the mansion's long-guarded secret seemed to quiver. One ultimate reckoning loomed on the horizon, the judgment Victor had evaded for years, now inescapable. The following day would deliver consequences, not only for Ryan and Langford, but for Victor himself and the legacy he would leave behind. The storm within the Caldwell house was only gathering strength. The auditorium shimmered under crystal chandeliers and festive banners.
Every seat in the auditorium was occupied by families dressed in their finest attire. Graduation day at Coastal Bay High had always been a grand affair. Names announced, diplomas handed out, bright futures celebrated. This year, however, a darker undercurrent thrummed beneath the polite smiles and applause. On stage, Mrs. Langford stood poised behind the lectern, the picture of restrained grief in a fitted black dress, pearls catching the light at her throat. As the ceremony neared its emotional peak, she raised the hand for quiet, her expression a flawless mask of shared mourning. "We come together today not only to honor accomplishment," she began, voice quivering with expertly feigned sorrow, "but to grieve the tragic loss of one of our most promising students, Aaliyah Brooks. She represented hope, a living example that anyone can overcome hardship." She paused dramatically, allowing a single tear to trace down her cheek. "Let us remember her by committing to be better, by embracing compassion, and by lifting one another through the deepest trials." The applause that followed was courteous but uneasy, ringing hollow in the charged air. Students sat in neat rows, faces tense with confusion of buried guilt. Ryan Caldwell occupied a solitary seat near the rear, hair unkempt, fingers digging into his chair until his knuckles gleamed white, eyes flicking nervously from Langford to the exits and back to the floor where beads of sweat pooled at his feet. Langford pressed on, drawing each word with solemn gravity. "This class has endured profound challenges, yet it is in hardship that true character emerges. Aaliyah's spirit endures in all of us, calling us to live with honesty and integrity." Suddenly the rear doors exploded open with a resounding bang that cut every murmur short. A column of weathered, resolute men marched down the aisle. Leading them strode Marcus Brooks in pristine marine tress blues, shoes gleaming like mirrors, medals flashing with every measured step, eyes sweeping the room like a honed edge. Gasps spread through the crowd as he advanced, flanked by Leon and Tyrone in their faded military jackets. Behind them, more veterans sealed the entrances, forming an immovable barrier of quiet defiance. Sheriff Harlan, posted near the doors with his deputies, attempted to intervene, but the veterans closed ranks without a word. He sputtered, "You can't! This is a private event!" Yet the old soldiers held their ground, their presence carrying an authority far older and deeper than his badge. On stage, Langford's composure faltered, microphone trembling in her grasp. "Mr. Brooks, this is completely inappropriate. Please." Marcus ascended the steps, the audience parting instinctively before him. He took center stage beneath the bright lights, medals glinting, and faced the assembly. For one suspended heartbeat, the room held its breath. Then, from stage left, a wheelchair emerged, guided gently by Leon. Victor Caldwell, gaunt, gray, yet alert, sat wrapped in blankets, gaze locked on Langford with a blend of anguish and iron resolve. A wave of stunned murmurs swept the hall, but it paled beside what followed. From the wings stepped a slender figure, braids neat, eyes blazing with purpose. Aaliyah Brooks, alive, bearing faint bruises, yet radiant, stood tall under the harsh spotlights, chin raised, surveying the crowd. A collective gasp rose, disbelief rippling like a physical force. For an instant, Langford could only gape, the microphone slipping from her fingers to screech with feedback. Ryan's scream shattered the stunned quiet. "No, no, she's supposed to be dead." He scrambled from his seat, tripping over chairs in frantic escape. On stage, Aaliyah faced the audience, voice clear and unwavering amid the shock. "I'm not dead. I survived, and I will no longer stay silent." Marcus stood protectively behind her, hands resting on her shoulders, lending the strength he had carried alone for so long. Langford, face drained of color, tried to regain control. "This is outrageous! A stunt! Sheriff Harlan, arrest them!"
Harlan pushed forward from the aisle but remained trapped by the veteran's line. "This violates every rule. No one has the right." Victor lifted a shaking hand, voice weak yet commanding. "You will all listen." Absolute silence fell. Victor turned his gaze first to his son, then to Langford, pain and shame carving deep lines in his face. "For years I used wealth to silence voices. I bought comfort with my own cowardice. But I have learned the truth of what happened to Aaliyah, of the lies spoken in this very room, of the poison within my own home." He nodded towards Marcus, who placed the tape recorder on the podium. Leon played play. Langford's voice filled the auditorium, threats, admissions, a calculated cover-up of attempted murder, followed by Ryan's broken, accusing sobs. Chaos erupted, parents shouting in outrage, teachers reeling, students dissolving in tears. Harlan tried again to advance, but the veterans held firm. On stage, Langford's facade crumbled completely. She lunged at Victor, claws outstretched, shrieking, "You destroyed everything! I did it all for us!" Aaliyah moved instantly, stepping in between them in a defensive stance drilled by her father years ago. With one fluid twist, she pinned Langford's arm behind her and forced the woman to her knees. The crowd gasped as Langford struggled helplessly. Ryan bolted for escape, but Tyrone intercepted him at the stage steps, immobilizing him with one massive hand. Deputies hesitated at the edges, uncertain whose orders to follow. From the rear door, state troopers, summoned earlier by Marcus, entered with calm authority, cutting through the turmoil. One officer read Langford's her rights as she was hauled upright, mascara-streaked tears flowing freely. Another cuffed Ryan, who collapsed into heaving sobs. On stage, Aaliyah addressed the hushed assembly. "Truth matters. Power can destroy, or it can heal. Today we decide what kind of community we will be." The audience sat frozen, witnessing decades of buried secrets hauled into merciless light. At the podium, Marcus watched his daughter reclaim her future, watched entrenched corruption collapse, watched genuine justice take root in the unlikeliest ground. Backstage, Victor wept, not for himself, but for everything irretrievably lost, and for the faint possibility of something still worth saving. The auditorium itself seemed to contract under the weight of revelation.
Every breath in the crowded auditorium hung heavy with tense expectation. The police lingered at the edges, while parents and students remained frozen in disbelief at the dramatic reversal. Aaliyah's miraculous return, Victor's raw public confession, the devastating recording, all had obliterated the polished traditions of graduation, replacing them with something stark, authentic, and utterly irreversible. On stage, Mrs. Langford twisted futilely in Aaliyah's firm hold, her once impeccable facade completely shattered. Her pearl necklace snapped, beads skittering across the wooden planks like fragments of a meticulously built illusion finally crumbling. Under the harsh spotlight, she appeared diminished and pathetic, all traces of command stripped away. Ryan, paralyzed in the aisle, suddenly dropped to his knees as violent sobs tore through him, the kind born from years of suppressed fear and deception finally breaking free. Tears carved paths down his face as he pointed a trembling finger at Langford. "She forced me into it. She wanted the money. She said Aaliyah would destroy everything, that no one would care if she vanished. I never wanted any of it. I just wanted the nightmare to end. She swore she'd make it all disappear if I obeyed her." His confession tumbled out in frantic bursts, desperate for release and forgiveness. Every gaze shifted to Langford, her carefully crafted mask gone forever. She shrieked, voice raw and venomous. "You pathetic liar! You think they'll take your word over mine? You think this town gives a damn about a spoiled, damaged boy like you?" Aaliyah's hold tightened. "Enough," she declared, voice cutting cleanly through the turmoil. "The world knows the truth now." Langford struggled wildly, but Aaliyah maintained control, not driven by revenge, but by the steady discipline instilled by her father and forged through years of survival. She looked down at the fallen woman, eyes reflecting both pity and disdain. "You tried to erase me. You tried to erase the truth. but you can't erase who you really are." From the far side of the stage, Victor raised a frail hand. Leon passed him the microphone, and for a moment only the faint buzz of overhead lights broke the hush. Victor's voice, though weakened, sliced through like tempered steel. "Stop!" The single word halted everything. Even Langford ceased her thrashing, chest heaving, mascara running in dark streaks. Victor fixed his gaze on Ryan. "I was blind. I let wealth and arrogance twist my son into someone I scarcely recognize. But you are still my son, Ryan. It is not too late for you to speak the truth. That alone can redeem you now." He turned to Langford, contempt sharpening his features. "But you, Victoria, I see your true nature at last. I have heard your schemes, your poison, your manipulation. You exploited my frailty, weaponized my son's terror, yet you underestimated the resilience of those you sought to crush." Langford surged forward in fury. "You senile old man! I did it all for you, for us! You would have died and left everything to that useless boy." Victor gripped the microphone tighter, voice gaining strength and righteousness. "No, Victoria, you did it only for yourself. You murdered, you deceived, you tried to hasten my end before I could alter my will. You are done here. From this moment, you are stripped of every trust, every position, every claim on this family. You will receive nothing beyond what the courts decree." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the reality settled. For the first time, Langford appeared genuinely terrified, not of prison, but of utter insignificance. Ryan, utterly broken, folded forward and sobbed into his hands. "I'm sorry," he choked. "I'm sorry, Aaliyah. I'm sorry, Dad." Victor, face etched with sorrow yet resolve, continued. "From today forward, all my resources, the entire family fortune, will fund every possible legal pursuit against you, Victoria, against every collaborator, every silent enabler. Aaliyah, you have my solemn promise. There will be justice." Langford let out an animal scream and launched herself at Victor, fingers clawing for his throat. The audience recoiled in shock. Aaliyah reacted instantly on pure instinct, twisting Langford's wrist in one seamless motion and forcing her back to her knees. Langford wailed again, rage drowned in pain and humiliation. Aaliyah met her eyes, voice low and unbreakable. "It's over." State troopers advanced from the wings, bypassing the hesitant local deputies. One recited Langford her rights as cuffs clicked shut, and she was led away, head bowed in defeat. Another guided Ryan gently but firmly from the stage. He offered no resistance this time. The assembly watched in hushed awe as true law, not the kind bought and sold, finally asserted itself. Marcus joined Aaliyah center stage, resting a steadying hand on her back. Victor slumped deeper into his wheelchair, tears flowing not for his own fate, but for the suffering he had permitted. A low murmur rose from the crowd, soft at first, then swelling. "Justice! Justice!" As Langford and Ryan were escorted from the hall, the oppressive weight of old secrets, entrenched power, and lingering hatred seemed to ease, fading under the fierce, cleansing glare of truth. Aaliyah, tears tracing quietly down her cheeks, looked first to her father, then to the community she had reclaimed for herself and for generations to come. She stood tall, survivor, witness, catalyst for change. Behind her, the stage lay scattered with remnants of a shattered era, scattered pearls, smeared mascara, tears, shame. Yet before her stretched something fresh and unbroken, a future belonging to them all. As applause swelled like gathering thunder, Aaliyah understood that this moment of confession was not merely reckoning, it marked the dawn of something Langford and Ryan could never have imagined.
The state police headquarters rose like an imposing fortress of glass and stone, its interior chilled despite the midday sun outside.
In a stark, windowless interrogation room, Victoria Langford sat chained to the table opposite her court-appointed attorney, wrists shackled, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, yet still flickering with remnants of defiance. Gone were the pearls and elegant outfits. In their place hung a loose gray jumpsuit that erased any trace of her former authority. The change was profound. The once regal queen of the classroom reduced to just another inmate in an endless row of cells. She barely lifted her gaze as the detectives entered, carrying thick files and a tape recorder. The lead investigator's badge caught the harsh light. He had no tolerance for local favoritism and no interest in theatrics. "Mrs. Langford," he opened evenly, "anything you'd like to say before we begin?" Langford remained silent. Her attorney, thin and visibly nervous, leaned in to urge quiet. The detective clicked his pen and proceeded. "We already have charges lodged: attempted murder, conspiracy, tampering with evidence, fraud. But parts of your background don't align. Your booking fingerprints matched a sealed record from another state." Langford's jaw clenched. For a moment she appeared to consider her choices, but arrogance kept her mute. The detective laid out documents and pushed a photograph across the table. A faded mugshot gazed back, the same eyes as Langford's, though the hair was darker, features sharper, expression coldly resolute. When she offered no response, he continued, "You're not Victoria Langford, born Evelyn Harris in 1946, institutionalized at Ridgewood State Hospital in 1968, following the suspicious death of your husband, John Harris, insurance claim never substantiated. You escaped custody 2 years later and vanished. The trail stayed cold until today." Her attorney's face paled. "Victoria, is this accurate?" Langford stared fixedly at the tabletop, fingers twisting in the restraints. The detective pressed forward. "You had reconstructive surgery, assumed new identities, forged teaching credentials, drifting state to state wherever opportunity arose. Rumors followed you everywhere. Missing funds, unexplained deaths, always slipping just beyond prosecution's reach. You preyed on the vulnerable, twisted the weak, all while posing as a devoted advocate for students." He tapped the old photo. "This isn't mere illness or simple greed. It's a lifelong pattern of exploitation, domination, and evasion. You selected Ryan Caldwell, yes, but he was only the most recent piece on your board." Langford finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "He needed guidance. So did I." Her attorney leaned closer. "Victoria, cooperation is your only chance. Tell the truth." She interrupted with a bitter laugh. "Truth in a world built entirely on deception?" The detective shook his head. "You could have fled again. Instead, you tried to obliterate a young girl, shatter a family, corrupt a whole community. Why go so far, Victoria?" A brief shadow crossed her face. Regret, perhaps, or sheer weariness. "Because I knew no one would believe them. Not against me. Not against everything I'd constructed." Silence stretched heavy in the small room. Her attorney rifled through the dossier, hands unsteady. "They'll file across multiple states. Fraud, escape, attempted murder. This goes far beyond local now." The detective positioned the old mugshot beside her current booking photo. The stark before and after was undeniable, predator unchanged across decades. He met her eyes directly. "It's over. Every alias, every deception, the mask is gone." Langford sagged in her chair, the last sparks of resistance fading. "I never intended it to finish like this." "People like you rarely do," the detective replied. Beyond the door, prosecutors and investigators began coordinating, reaching out to other states, gathering witnesses, tracing financial records and falsified documents. For every falsehood Langford had spun, another thread waited to be pulled. Meanwhile, Ryan sat isolated in a holding cell, mind splintered, hands trembling as he stared at blank concrete, reliving the auditorium exposure, the tape, the instant every shield crumbled.
He was no longer heir, golden son, or even feared bully, just a discarded, fractured young man. Back in the interview room, the attorney collected his papers, hopelessness settling over him. "Victoria, you have to help yourself." Langford gazed emptily ahead. "I am exhausted. Let them do whatever they want." As officers moved to escort her, the detective left one final item on the table, the old mugshot bearing her true name and the full chronicle of her crimes. Langford glanced down at it, the trajectory of her life laid bare at last. In that instant, she appeared diminished beyond recovery, a common criminal, stripped of charm and cunning. "Remove her," the detective commanded. The door shut with resounding finality. Word raced through town in waves of shock and disbelief. No one could fully accept the revelation. The revered Mrs. Langford exposed as a fugitive fraud, a manipulator, a would-be killer hiding behind a teacher's warmth. But in every hushed conversation, at kitchen tables, along sidewalks, in school hallways and church pews, one truth stood undeniable. The genuine pathology had never resided in Ryan. He had been merely a victim, an instrument. The true predator was the one who had concealed herself in plain view, smiling from the front of the classroom. As state authorities built their airtight case and media descended on the scandal, Coastal Betty's entrenched ways shifted irrevocably. And as Langford's old mugshot anchored the growing file, one dark era closed.
A fresh form of justice was poised to take hold. The coastal breeze had shifted its character. Once it carried the sharp bite of salt mingled with buried secrets. Now it bore a lighter touch, whispering that old wounds could finally settle into the earth rather than linger in the air. 1 year after the explosive confrontation at Coastal Bay High, the shoreline appeared unchanged. Waves crashing steadily, gulls circling above, the weathered remains of the old pier stretching into the murky green-gray sea. Yet for Aaliyah Brooks, everything had transformed. She stood beside her father on the rocks, where not long before she had dragged herself from the waves, bloodied but defiant. Gazing at the ocean now stirred no terror, only a profound sense of liberation. The intervening year had unfolded like a slow, inexorable tide. Reports of the trials rippled far beyond their quiet Florida town, headlines blazing with tales of treachery, avarice, and a plot that had tainted an entire community as much as a single school. Beneath the media frenzy, genuine transformation began to emerge. Victoria Langford's trial proved swift and unrelenting. The overwhelming evidence, her own admissions, forged documents, and the unearthed mugshot from decades past painted a portrait so disturbing that the courtroom fell into stunned silence, even as she attempted final pleas or shifts of blame. She received life without parole, her original name officially restored on record as every crime was recited in full. Those once calculating eyes stared blankly as she was escorted away. Years later, word reached them quietly. She died alone in prison, unvisited and unmourned, interred without rite or remembrance. Her ultimate sentence, not the bars, but utter oblivion. For Ryan Caldwell, the path to reckoning proved far more tangled. Initial fury and dread overwhelmed him upon entering the state youth facility, stripped of every privilege and expectation. Yet the environment there bore no resemblance to Langford's realm of deception and control. Ryan was compelled to face his own reflection, his instability, his cowardice, his active role in the horror. Therapy stretched long and grueling. The young man who once issued commands and hurled venom passed sleepless nights tormented by actions taken and opportunities missed. Gradually, humility took root. He learned to repair engines, scrub floors, exist without the burden of his surname. Upon release, he vanished into a neighboring county, earning a quiet living in an auto garage through honest effort and calloused hands.
Each Christmas, an awkward handwritten letter arrived for Aaliyah, a tentative confession seeking some measure of absolution for a year forever lost. Aaliyah replied only once with a single line, "Forgiveness belongs to my healing, not your ease." Still, the letters persisted annually, long after public memory had faded. Victor Caldwell, liberated from both Langford's toxins and his own delusions, survived just long enough to witness the first blooms of redemption. He redirected nearly his entire fortune into a newly established foundation bearing Aaliyah's name, granting full scholarships to talented students from every background, erecting a modern library, and supporting counseling and anti-bullying programs across the district. His remaining days passed in quiet reflection, filled with letters of contrition and flashes of humility that had evaded him for most of his life. For a while, Aaliyah guarded her experiences closely, wary of the curiosity and sympathy that threatened to overwhelm her anew. But the world refused to let her remain merely emblem or casualty. The Foundation's support enabled travel, allowing her to discover America's scarred yet resilient landscape. Campuses in Boston, shores of the Great Lakes, vast heartland stretches. She never abandoned the principles her father instilled: resilience, honesty, and the boldness to embrace hope. Scars from the past softened, giving way to fresh trials and victories. Aaliyah completed her studies with distinction, enlisted in the Navy, and forged a life far beyond anything her would-be erasers could have foreseen. Decades rolled onward. By 2025, the town had evolved profoundly. The former high school vanished, replaced by a bright new facility whose walls burst with murals created by students of every heritage. Gym banners honored names once deliberately overlooked. On a radiant spring morning, the community assembled to dedicate the new Coastal Bay Library, constructed with Victor's final bequest and named for the woman who refused to sink. Aaliyah Brooks waited backstage in crisp uniform, ribbons gleaming across her chest. At 68, silver threaded her braids, yet her posture remained as resolute as the day she confronted Langford on that fateful stage. Though her father had passed, she bore his legacy in every gesture and word. She approached the podium amid swelling applause, diverse faces gazing up, black, white, brown, every hue of a renewed nation. In the front row, young graduates in caps and gowns laughed with unshadowed optimism, untouched by the fears that had defined her youth. Aaliyah cleared her throat, voice resonant yet laced with remembrance. 51 years ago, I stood in a hall much like this one, the sole block girl in my graduating class. I felt isolated, or so I believed. I confronted hatred not only in slurs, but in deeds from those convinced they could strip away my voice, my dreams, even my life. They failed, not because I was uniquely remarkable, but because I rejected the falsehoods, claiming I was lesser. Because others discovered the bravery to stand with me despite the peril. Because justice, however delayed, becomes attainable when we insist upon it, when we construct it ourselves. The audience sat wrapped in reverent quiet. Across these years, I have learned that malevolence does not disappear, it merely alters form. Once it sought to hurl me into the depths. Today it conceals itself behind screens, policies, indifference. Modern adversaries wield subtler arms, anonymity, exclusion, bureaucracy, yet the damage remains profound. Never assume injustice is vanquished. It endures, but so does valor. She paused, words settling deeply, then swept her gaze across the room, connecting with the young eyes destined to continue the struggle. As a girl, they attempted to obliterate me. As a woman, I chose unbroken silence no longer. Today, I urge you, do not become the quiet ones. Silence aids cruelty. Speak out, rise up, compel them to acknowledge you, to hear you, to answer for their actions. The future is not etched in granite, it is inscribed by the courageous. Thunderous applause erupted in waves. Some wept openly. Others smiled with hands over their hearts. When the event concluded, Aaliyah lingered by the water's edge as she had in girlhood. The sea stretching before her felt transformed, no longer menace, but vibrant archive, bearing echoes of the vanished and aspirations of the yet-to-arrive. She inhaled deeply, tasting salt on the breeze, and felt truly unbound. The tale, ever unfinished, now belonged to everyone. Sometimes the greatest act of bravery is simply to endure and then to testify. Aaliyah's Odyssey teaches that injustice is no outdated artifact. It adapts, cloaking itself anew in each era, yet courage evolves alongside it. We beheld a young black woman, once marginalized, ascend not solely for herself, but for all who had felt invisible, unheard, unwelcomed. Amid shadows of deceit and brutality, Aaliyah, Marcus, and their unexpected allies illuminated the profound alchemy of truth, mercy, and optimism. This narrative transcends mere catalog of human wickedness. It celebrates the quiet and monumental resilience required to resist, to shatter silence, to forge improvement. It reveals how societies mend and how tomorrow is molded by those resolute enough to act when conformity whispers surrender. So I ask you, when have you summoned the resolve to raise your voice despite difficulty, or longed for another to do so on your behalf? Share your experience below. Your words might illumine another's path. If this voyage stirred you, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more compelling accounts and indelible figures. Your engagement enables us to amplify further voices. Together, we can continue shaping a world where no one stands solitary.